morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm John North, your moderator. John Becker is away this morning. 'Tis the season to talk about the Tennessee legislature, and that's what we're going to do. We did it last weekend, and our guest this morning is State Senator Richard Briggs of Knoxville, who is about to start his third four-year term. He joins us this morning. Dr. Briggs, thank you so much.
Good morning.
And we'll be talking to him in just 1 minute, but let me introduce our regular panelists. You know them. First, we've got Susan Richardson-Williams. She is runs her own PR firm and is a longtime Republican. And then we've got Don Bosch, who is an attorney and a Democrat. Welcome to both of you. It's good to see you.
Good morning, John.
Happy holidays to both of you. So we want to cover a variety of topics this morning, Dr. Briggs, and I thought we might as well, I feel a little badly because this will be the third show we've talked to you about this topic, but it is extremely important, and that is the whole issue of women's reproductive health and the question of Tennessee's law regarding abortion access. You know this very well as a physician, that essentially there are no exceptions. There is a defense in the law which would allow somebody, if they were charged with a crime, to have a defense, but that is little compensation for the person facing a criminal charge of providing an abortion. So I want to ask you, Dr. Briggs, just give us your thoughts. We are about a month away from the legislature starting. What you think the chances are of any kind of a change and what you think ought to be changed, and then Don and Susan will jump in.
Well, to answer the first part of that question, I don't know what the odds are because I have a difficult time predicting how people are going to vote. The essential issue is that there's two parts to the abortion law that's presently the trigger law, we called it, that kicked in after the Roe was overturned this past summer. And one part of that said that any termination of pregnancy was a crime, was a felony. And then the second part of it said that any doctor, any physician that performs that for any reason has committed a crime. And I'll have to leave it maybe up to our attorney here to tell us this, but my understanding is that affirmative action, which was in that law, means that a doctor is guilty, unlike most in our judiciary process, and he has to prove his innocence.
That's a fair analysis, Richard. It is, the burden shifts. It's one of the rare times in criminal law where the burden shifts to the defendant to prove his or her innocence, and that is the troubling portion of that bill. But let me ask Senator Dr. Briggs, certainly I think we consider each other friends, and so I mean no disrespect in this, but you're a physician, you're a veteran senator. How did this bill get by you? You're smarter than that. You know that there need to be exceptions for at least the life of the mother. One might argue rape and incest, which are horrible. I certainly would disagree. And with this, making it a crime and making the burden shift to the doctor, one of which you are, granted you did not practice in that field, I'm just surprised that you didn't speak up earlier, because you are speaking up some now, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think there's two issues on that. Is when this went through the Judiciary Committees and the Senate Health Committee, and I am a doctor, but I'm not on the Health Committee. And that's really where the debates occur. That's where amendments are added or rejected, and that did not happen when it was going through those committees. Quite frankly, I don't know if they were even proposed at the committee. Now, there was amendments proposed on the Senate floor, but generally our Senate rules say if there's anything significant proposed as an amendment on the Senate floor, it goes back to committee for discussion. And part of the reason, of course, is that once it gets to the Senate floor, you can't call experts, you can't call different organizations to speak on it. You either have to vote it up or down.
Well, I understand. It's a pretty short bill.
Yeah.
And a short piece of legislation. Did you read it thoroughly and understand it when you voted on it?
And you've probably heard, no, I did not understand what affirmative defense was. And to anyone, I apologize to that. I'm not a lawyer. Quite frankly, I didn't think there would be anything in the law. I thought that was part of the basic rights in American jurisprudence, that if you've committed a crime, you're innocent until proven guilty by the state. And I do not know what affirmative defense was.
And I respect that answer. Just one last question. Moving forward, would you vote, given the opportunity, to make changes such as for the life of the mother, taking out the affirmative defense aspect of it and still removing any burden on a doctor, let alone we don't have prohibitions on the mother, but keeping that from happening, and possibly even for rape and incest and matters like that. Would you consider supporting changes of that nature?
You know, I would. And rather than calling it, changes or calling it a new bill, I'd prefer to call it a clarification of the bill. And I think there's two things that need to be changed. Is that one, we need to do away with the affirmative defense. I think doctors that are saving the life of women, and I'm going to give you a perfect example, a ruptured ectopic pregnancy.
Sure.
For a doctor to take a woman in shock to the operating room, and I've done those operations when I was a general surgery resident, then to save the life of a woman who's going to die if you don't do it, I don't think that should be a crime. And I don't think the doctor should have to prove that he didn't commit a crime. The second thing is, and I've said this also, I think we need clarifications, and I'm talking about simply from a medical standpoint about when pregnancies need to be terminated. Again, life or health of the mother. We can have women that are diagnosed in the early stages of pregnancy with acute leukemias. They've got to get chemotherapy. You can't be pregnant. You have ruptured ectopic pregnancies. There's other instances where, I hate to call it an abortion, but you need to terminate the pregnancy for the life of the mother. And I think those need to be added in there. And I do also support having in the cases of rape and incest, most of the incestes are on very young children, and if you have an 11-year-old girl that gets pregnant, now this is going to be between her parents, her ministers, the priest, and the family and the doctor, but that little girl should not be forced to carry a pregnancy to where it may damage her internal organs to the point where she can never get married when she gets older and have children of her own. I just don't think that that's right.
Susan?
Let me ask you, we had Representative Jason Zachary on last week and talking about this topic. I asked him if there was any appetite in the House to make changes. He said no. Do you see any appetite in the Senate for at least getting to what you just described, to getting to there in a bill?
Well, I think it's less absolute in the Senate because I was in Nashville last week and I spoke with two other Senate members, and these are not liberal senators. I mean, these are part of our Republican leadership even. And one of them is going to be carrying a bill that removes the affirmative defense clause, and then the other one is also working, I hate to call it exceptions, but we really need to separate medical terminations of pregnancy from abortions that are being done because the pregnancy is inconvenient or it's embarrassing or they're doing it for gender selection or they're doing it because they want to provide tissue, in particular stem cell tissue, for maybe some sort of medical research.
Do you think the governor, let's say it did pass, these exceptions passed, do you think the governor would sign it?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what's
in the bill.
It depends on what's actually in the bill.
That is a big question, which we'll all be watching. It's time that we take a break. You're watching Inside Tennessee. When we come back, we'll talk about child welfare, which is going to be a key issue come January.